Good day. This is the next episode of Happy Buyer, Happy Seller. And we're very fortunate today to have a gentleman who I worked with a number of years ago in the sale of his business, John Selbach. We'll get into his business. I'll let him tell you rather than me. But we had a very good experience in the sale of his business. Sometimes you get good people who come together, and that's exactly what happened with myself and John, and then the buyer of the business, a couple of gentlemen who will be on the podcast in a few weeks' time. So maybe John, if you could just give us a little background to the business, the longevity, when you started it, how you started it, the business is, and your take on how we started. Let's put it.
Okay. Okay. Well, the business that I started in 1978 was manufacturer of industrial overhead cranes. And so we started as a service company and then eventually evolved into more than that, small manufacturing job, confined mostly to Florida. My wife and I ran the business until we sold it in 2020. Actually, August of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, which was an interesting fact in itself. My experience is sort of self-taught. I'll say I'm an ambitious welder. And so we're a technical business, but at the end of the day, we're as much technical as we are contracting. So we have a unique niche in that we hold general contractor's license here in Florida, and about 20 people. So it's relatively small business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my background is manufacturing and engineering and in the steel industry, as you know, way back before I became a business broker. But the one of the many things I remember about your business, which was quite niche, is that your installation, you did your own, and I'm sure still do your own installation, which I always thought that sort of set you apart from anybody. You didn't just sell overhead cranes. What you sold was the solution, if you will.
And that makes a difference to especially general contractor customers. They're not looking for somebody to drop a overhead crane at their job site and say, "Here you go." They want to see it up and running and tested and so forth. So having that installation component was a big help, as well as when we need to work in a customer's existing plant. Having your own crew and good controls were a big factor, and I think a big value to the business, to the new owners. It makes it a little tougher, but at the same time, it's a little more satisfying as an owner.
Yeah. So okay, we met in 2000. I think maybe listed in 19, perhaps, but obviously, as you say, we sold it in 2020 under those rather strange circumstances of the pandemic being around. So the first question then is, why did you sell the business? What brought you to the conclusion that it was time to sell the business after what was then 42 years, I guess?
Well, it's something I always knew would have to happen. I do have a couple of children, but I chose the sale route for a couple reasons. One, only one of the children is interested or is in working in the business, so it made the estate split, if you will, to the heirs a little easier to define. And the other thing is that if I didn't sell it, if we kept it in the family, I didn't feel like I would ever be truly out of it and not have the stress of successful operation. That and my age, when we did the deal, I just turned 70. Just turned 70, so you can't do anything forever, and I think it was just time. It probably took altogether about 5 years to make the deal, because I tried the do-it-yourself approach for a while, and I worked with a different broker, and then Shaun and I finally were successful. But it took Shaun and I a year and a half after marketing the business to and many interviews and discussions with potential buyers.
So, if you were to give in a piece of advice to a business owner who's at the point that just made that same decision you made, if you give them a piece of advice to them as far as the route that they should take and how they should approach it, the sale of the business, what would that be? How would you suggest they start off?
Well, as I mentioned, I tried to do it yourself and marketed the business directly to a few industry contacts, and that really didn't go anywhere. And I'm not sure that in most businesses it would. So I would skip the do it yourself. If I had it to do again, I would skip that step and go right to the broker system. I became acquainted with my first broker through a real estate broker that I'd been working with on a different business that my wife and I own. And I think great guy, it just wasn't a good fit for maybe my type of business. Eventually, Shaun and I got connected through an acquaintance that I had actually from a ski instructor that I worked with, but she also had a marketing business who connected me to Shaun's company that he was with, his brokerage. And Shaun got the short straw and called me, and we hit it off real well. But we spent probably the better morning discussing the Super Bowl and talked a little bit about business. But then we parted ways for about a year. And then when I was unsuccessful with the first broker, I came back to Shaun, and I think the difference, Shaun's attention to detail and the way he marketed my business was a good fit for me personally, and also a good fit for the business.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's nice of you to say that. So yeah, so no, don't do it yourself. Get a broker, get a good broker. My recommendation would be interview 2 or 3. Try to get an understanding of how they operate, which is essentially more or less what you do. I always say go talk to several brokers. There's nothing wrong with that. So how do they search though? How do they search? It was a bit lucky. So the other thing that you haven't said is that you own several properties, and in fact, one of those properties, a lady had a business, a doggy hotel, and I obviously I met with her, and we sold that business, and I think that's where we first bumped shoulders.
Yeah.
And you were the evil landlord, of course, at that time.
You remember that very well.
Maybe my mind's a little foggy. Yeah, but so John was the landlord. So I think there's also that connection as well. I think we sort of brushed up against one another for that as well. So yeah, so I don't know. If you're searching, if you're going to sell your business, my recommendation would be do a proper search, talk to brokers, and be very careful, because you are going to be joined at the hip for 12 months.
Absolutely. Many, and I did everything on my employees didn't know until the day of the announcement. And even my immediate family, other than my wife, didn't know about the deal until we had actually closed. And so I think in many cases, that's the best way to do things. But Shaun was very good about the way he posted my adverts to attract buyers, but not give away the secret till where it got back to my employees. One of my goals, and we accomplished it, was to be able to retain these employees. I had some that had been with me 20 plus years, and I didn't want to just pack up and liquidate the business and move it to another state or something like that. I wanted to have something that would be ongoing, and they could maintain their employment if they wanted to, but also that's a big value for the new buyer to have people, especially in a business like ours, that know what they're doing and know the customers and just generally that bank of knowledge that you can only get by experience. Uh, the other thing that I think is important about having a broker is to accurately establish the price. And John went about that in a pretty scientific way with some references. I think that's critical. I think it's good in my case, and we did not have to have a certain price to make it work. We wanted a fair price, and but we weren't counting on a certain number to make our retirement, so we were comfortable that way. I think the other part of the broker relationship that I think was helpful to me was the way that the business was presented. Shaun has a very organized, I guess, portal where the potential buyers were able to look at the facts and figures, and he could release those as appropriate. And he had a record of who looked at which documents and who downloaded which documents and so forth and so on. I thought that was important for anything that would come up down the road where somebody said, I didn't know, or you didn't tell me, or you held that from me. That hasn't happened in my case. We've had a very good relationship with the new buyer, and there's been no complaint about secrets kept or anything like that. But I think it's important detail to have that documentation maintained, and Shaun did all that for me.
Yeah, I think so. What John is referring to there is in our parlance we call a deal room, and well, we get that. As you know, I'm a member of the International Business Brokers Association, and that is a little something that we get as part. So it's called Vault Rooms, VAULT Vault Rooms. It's the name of the company that supplies it, and it is absolutely invaluable. I absolutely love it, love it, love it. It puts stuff in there, as John says, once people have signed a non-disclosure, they go and they can see the information, but they only see what I release to them. So you've got to walk them up the ladder a wee bit, and that's exactly what we did. And I just want to turn back to the point that John made about confidentiality. So, with all due respect to pizza places, if you're selling a pizza place in Orlando and you advertise Pizza Place Orlando, then nobody's really going to find out which one it is until they've signed the non-disclosure. If you advertise a overhead traveling crane builder Orlando, that is that's not the same. So I think we advertised it. I can't quite remember. I think manufacturing business located in the greater Orlando area, something like that. I tried. So it's got to be as vanilla as you possibly can when you're advertising something like that. You can be very, very, very careful indeed. So why is that? Well, why is that? Because you don't want to, you don't want to startle the employees. You don't want to have your customer base concerned that things are, are going to change. Suppliers, well, well, wait a minute, it's got so much credit with us. We want to let's just tie that up a little bit, tighten that up a wee bit. We never know what's going to happen. So all of that is very, 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 very important indeed that's kept confidential, and clearly we were certainly able to do that with your own business naturally.
That's the key, and I think one of the things that through the process, a few of the prospective buyers said, "Well, we want to meet your 5 biggest customers," and that was a deal breaker right off the bat. That negotiations were over at that point. If they can see the books and they can't make a decision from the profitability of the company, the customers, they wanted some sort of written guarantee from these customers that they would continue to do business with us. And obviously no nobody's going to give them that in the first place. But number two, I don't need to be telling customers I have the business for sale. I don't want them to be concerned and think that they might have to go someplace else for the products and services that I'm providing them. So that was a key thing with us. I think we accomplished that pretty well. I think I didn't have one customer. The new owner and I went to some of the key customers and for an introduction after the fact, but they had no idea until we told them that this was happening. And even after the deal was done, we announced it on our terms. So I think I can't stress that enough.
That's a good point. That really is. It's confidentiality. And again, going back to John's earlier point of why use a broker. That's one of the major reasons why you would want to use a broker. So, what should sellers expect when a business is listed for sale and potential buyers come along? What, as a seller, should they expect? What's going to happen when a potential buyer sits across the table from them?
Well, from what I remember, you would handle scheduling, obviously, of a meeting that we could have face to face, and I would get usually some information ahead of time. Certainly, by the time we had a meeting, we usually had some sort of money offer at least discussed, and but not always. And I know a little bit about the background of the buyers, so I have some preparation. But at that point, then you take it from there, and you find out a lot about each other in that first meeting. And sometimes there's only one meeting. Often there's only one meeting. But as things go on, then if you like each other, then you probably have more communication, and then maybe more information is revealed. But generally, I'd say it's a grueling experience as a seller. Plan your weekends. You're not going to have any fun during that period of time. You're going to be meeting. Well, they're great people. You have fun with that, but other than that, you're very busy on top of your duties of running the business.
Yeah, I think the point there is when a buyer comes along for a meeting, or obviously these days more and more video conferences, although I personally like face-to-face meetings very, very much so. I think I've got to have done quite a bit of work before the potential buyer sits across the table from you, and that's, well, right, where are you? Where are you located? Why are you thinking of moving into any business, this type of business? What's your background? Obviously, we have to, financials, we have to understand. And I'm going to use this phrase very, very carefully. We have to understand financials and have those financials proved. So just to be clear, I will not put a buyer in front of a seller unless I know for sure what their true financial position is. That's my job. Any information like that's given to me, nobody is ever going to get that. And it's me. I'm the only person who sees it, goes in my files, and I'm the only person who accesses those files, and that's it. But it's needed. So proof of funds it's going to happen at some stage in the conversation, but a fairly early stage. We'll talk about financing. How people are going to actually finance a deal. But so we'll put that aside for just a second. So let's just jump on to, had you been, this is an interesting one. Had you been made an offer with either a promissory note or an earnout involved in that, how would you have viewed that?
Well, I had several, I think, where the buyer wanted me to carry some financing, and I always took, in other words, I guess, a promissory note, and I always took that as to mean that I wasn't going to get that next payment. I felt like as the buyer got into the business, he would figure out a way, and he'd have control over the books. He at that point, I just that never made me very comfortable. I didn't want to be a financer. And then the earnout, this was common with the industry players that I talked to directly. They all wanted me to, if the profitability was a certain level, they wanted that to be, they wanted to see that through for a certain period of time before I get the rest of my money. And that just had too many pitfalls. I wouldn't sign a deal like that ever. Because you just don't really have any control. You could wind up having to sue to get your money, and that, you know how that could work out, not very well. So I'd say anything with a buyout or a or earnout or a promissory note, I would discount those offers to the cash value component. I don't. Maybe some people use that successfully. I just didn't see it as a fit for me.
So just to be clear, they are different. Promissory note. Here's the way I always describe a promissory note. It's a pile of money, and there it sits, and you can look at it, but you can't touch it as the seller. So that's held by the buyer, and the buyer takes a certain amount off every month and sends it over to you. There you are, that's yours, but the pile of money is decreasing. I want to make it absolutely clear that the promissory note is not related to the ongoing performance of the business. It is between the individuals. The buyer, individual buyer and individual seller, that's between them, and it is personally guaranteed. It's it's like as we call it in our business, banco to seller. So that's that. Now an earnout is a different animal altogether, and there are two types of earnout. Earnout means that there will be the deal will close and a certain amount of money will be held off and for the earnout, and that money will be paid to the seller of the business as and when certain criteria have been met, and they could be on volume of sales, or they could be on bottom line profit. It could be whatever it is, but that's the thing. I think John made a very good point there. Industry buyers, industry buyers, they like that kind of stuff. That's what they like to do. So there are two types. One is the type A, is that the seller is still working in the business, and there's an earnout there, which is the better of the two, because, well, maybe not. The better of the two in that you've got control of the situation because you're still working in the business and effectively running the business, and you can see what's happening. You can see the books and see what the truth of the matter is. Type B is not working in the business and left to the devices of the buyer, and you hope that everything's going to be okay there. So those are two, but both of them have risk associated with them.
Well, I can see from the buyer standpoint, if the seller is going to continue to be the main manager of the business, then I think an earnout might make sense because, the seller wants some guarantee that he's going to give it his best shot to make the business successful. And since you're earning, well, that's the term, earnout, right? And but in my book, with my type of business, and I just didn't want to do that.
Industry buyers. I'll use my phrase again, Shaun's phrase, big boy buyers.
Yeah.
That's what they like to do, and they say what they say is, well, okay, we're gonna buy the business, we'll put that amount of money in, but we're not putting any more into it. It has to be financing self. The business has to continue to be self-financing for the next 2 to 3 to 4 years or whatever it is. So if again we can always explain that if anybody wishes to call in and discuss that. So I think we talked about seller responding when buyers make unreasonable requests, and you touched on that. I think I tell you, I give you a little example. Some years ago, I had a business for sale, and we were under contract, and we were rolling along, and we were 3 days from closing. And I called up the sellers, and it was a co-broke, by the way, it was co-broke. So I was representing the sellers, and another broker was representing the buyer. And I said, so the closing was Friday, this was Tuesday, say. And I called, how's things? Yeah, fine, okay, yeah, good. And they said, the seller said to me, yeah, because we're all prepared for tomorrow's meeting. So I said, oh, okay, good. I said, which meeting's that? They said, well, the meeting, where the buyer is going to meet all of the staff. I don't know if I told you this one. It's a cracker. I said, just run that by me again. Yeah, well, he called us up and he wanted to meet all the staff tomorrow, Wednesday, 2 days before closing. So I said, oh, okay, okay. I said, have you actually told the staff what the subject is? Fingers crossed. And they said, oh, no, we just assembled. I said, okay, the meeting is not taking place. So I called up the other broker. He didn't know about it either, I have to say. So that's the kind of thing. I mean, that could have created a deal. That could have, the implications of that could have been, I mean, people could have been walking out the door, the next day on the Thursday before closing, and then the buyer says, well, what's happening now? So and I know quite rightly you said nobody's going to
Yeah.
be meeting any of my staff.
Well, but that triggered another thought that I think some of the buyers tended to give you a list of questions or things that they wanted to do or meetings they wanted to have. And then after you got through that list, then they come and they add, what about this? And then after you answer that, what about this? So I think one of the things that we learned was, or I learned, Shaun's probably known for a long time, is get me your list, make it complete, because we're going to go through this once. And I mean, if the list of questions triggers another reasonable question, but if they start off on a whole different track, I think what you have is somebody that's never going to actually buy, or just want to run you to death and beat you down with wear you out and get it may affect the quality of the deal. So I think that's something, doing it over again, I would cut that off again, not let that happen.
Yeah, it's and again, that's that's a responsibility of the broker as well. You got to make sure. I have to tell you that over the years, John, I've become how best can I put it? More business-like with buyers. How's that? How's that? I'm really, before I put somebody in front of the seller, I really want to ensure that they are as genuine as can be, because there's a lot of people out there who are not.
Well, and you can get anxious, especially early on when you're the first couple of people that you see. It's like, this looks like a deal. Be patient. If it starts to become unreasonable, then just be prepared to say, sorry, well, this isn't going to work. There'll be other buyers. There'll be other buyers. If you have the right broker and the right presentation of the business, there'll be more.
Yeah, they're out there. Buyers is not an issue. Buyers is not an issue. Actually, right now, funding is not an issue. Right? Banks are knocking on the door all the time. I don't know if I told you, the last IBBA meeting I went to, which was in May here in Orlando. I've never seen so many banks there. There were. I stopped counting at 30. I stopped counting at 30 different banks. All, and of course, let's just remind ourselves what we're talking about here generally is SBA 7A, SBA 7A lending, which is geared towards what we're talking about here, and it works. It works, and if you get the right bank and you work with the right people, it's it's paperwork, and it's for the buyer. There's a lot there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of information that they have to give. But generally speaking, it's a wonderful institution, the 7A, and it's very much the lifeblood of our industry for the larger businesses.
And we had some of the offers were based on 7A, and then the successful buyer was actually a partnership, but they had their, well, one of them was from the banking industry, at least as far as experience working in it. So they had their own financing, and that made things, I think, a little smoother for the closing. But
Mhm, mhm.
but the SPA, I think, would be a great option.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Don't hesitate if you're a buyer. Don't hesitate to look at that. So now here's the thing: when when I reviewed your business financial information, I could see that you kept things, my phrase, clean as a whistle. Not always the case when you look at small businesses. So, what's your advice to business owners on that subject?
Well, just your books should be honest. Don't try to bury personal expenses in the books. And it's confusing to a buyer if you can picture, well, I have my daughter's car, and my son, his vacation to Europe, and those are all buried in expenses. So I want some value out of that. When you buy the business from me, I want you to consider that that's value I earned from the business. Well, that gets confusing and messy for the buyer. So I think it's best just to keep the personal uh, carve outs to a minimum. You know, dinner with your wife, okay, once in a while, that's not such a big deal. But when you start with major carve outs, that's a mess. And keep your books up to date. I know Mary is an accountant, and she kept things up to date. But even when we had the business, her time schedule was tightened up with Shaun. He was there every month wanting the new month's figures, because he kept an ongoing rolling average of our profitability for the prior 12 months. So that a buyer could come in and look in August, your profitability for the year prior was this. October, it was this, so forth and so on. So they could see if there was trends in seasonality, but just to see that you're consistent, that you're not basing everything on one good year or something. So the year end thing, which typical is for business tax returns and so forth, is great, but you should have that rolling average, because I think it's a little bit more information for the buyer to make a decision on.
Yeah, so that's called a trailing 12 months report. And
What's it called?
trailing 12
Oh,
months report. And you know, somebody comes along and said March or August or whatever it is. How's the business doing this year? Okay. Well, that's not the answer. The, the answer is here's the trailing 12 months report. That's the thing. And the other thing I would say is going back to John's point, if you need to get some uh, tidying up of your numbers, I think we're looking at 3 years. We've got 3 years worth of 3 years worth of numbers plus wherever we are in the current year. I think that's the way I always do it. Some people want to go back 5 years. Particularly when we're dealing with big boy buyers, they like to go back five. But generally speaking, 3 years, and we'll be yeah, that will be good. Okay, so and then after closing, the responsibilities. Uh, as you changed hands with the business to Peter, how did you what? And of course, you might say, well, it's still going on.
yeah,
That's 5 years later. You're still working in the business. That is
that's
good.
right. So I've been, and this was not a fixed amount. This is a paid deal as a consultant. So I've been a consultant to the business ever since the sale. So August 31st, I changed hats, but I had the same desk. I had the same everything. So I went back and worked well, actually, no, I had, went back and worked in the business to help with the transition. And the biggest thing out of the actual making the deal that I wanted to emphasize is that as a contracting / manufacturing business, we have a lot of projects that are in progress, work in progress, WIP, whatever the term you want to use is. So we had to decide how to carve out the responsibilities to finish those ongoing projects. Obviously, I couldn't finish them because all my forces and equipment were sold with the deal. So I had to rely on the new owners to finish. And then we had to decide on an equitable way to carve out the expenses for those jobs and then also the profitability. So we we did a model job, built it into a actual spreadsheet, and that was part of the closing document. I think that was invaluable to keep the peace, if you will, between the new owner and me because we just followed that template, and I think that's very important. I don't know what other. I don't think we had too many other things. We do have a leased property that the new company is using, and we agreed on a lease amount for 5 years and with an escalation clause, and I think has worked out satisfactorily for the new owner and for us as the property owners. But other than that, there wasn't any. Mary helped with the transition for the accounting, but we didn't have any kind of contract, and she wasn't paid for that. She did that just on her own as part of the deal for for as long as it took, which it wasn't long. And so that's, I think, important to me for a number of reasons. One, I'm obviously still working in the business. So I don't want to have any kind of an adversarial relationship with my boss or my customer. And I didn't because I had the business for so long and I had so many. It's a personal thing. So I wanted to see the business be successful. So I wanted to be able to help with that transition, and I didn't want to have anything cloud the quality of the deal.
Yeah, it's a, I mean, I have to tell you that this particular sale and purchase is one of the best ones I've seen. You know, good people and good people. It really helps you if you've got the right thought process, the right people. But uh, accounts receivable, work in process. Um, did you say I can't remember. Are you progress or process, man? I go back to my
Work in progress.
yeah, work in progress. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I think in my old days it was work in progress, and I've picked process up here. Anyway, the point is working. Call it what you will, and that's really important for a business like John's because you know obviously when there's a moment when the changeover takes place, and so what what materials, actual design work, manufacturing work, how much has been done, and so in construction and manufacturing businesses, you've really got to know that, and then accounts receivable. Whose is it? Well, the seller's going to tell you, well, it's mine. The buyer might say, well, a portion of it's mine, or they might come to a deal. Big boy buyers, accounts receivable, they consider that to be theirs. They consider that to be
Sure.
theirs. Yep, absolutely. So you got to be careful there. And but the knowledge is power. So knowing these things is knowing the details is really important.
Well, you raise a point. So uh, there's the big contracts that are in progress, and that's a lot of number crunching to get things equitably spread out. But on the jobs, on orders that were in quoted but hadn't been placed yet, customer orders, anything after the deadline went to the new company. Anything that was ordered before the deadline went to the old company, and that's a little unfair sometimes. But that's the way it worked out. I mean, I think the unfairness probably comes with the seller because you've worked maybe for days, maybe for weeks, maybe even months to get an order to fruition, and then it turns over 2 days after you sell. Uh, you've spent that money, and that's part of the value. That's really part of the value of what the customer, the buyer, has bought from you is that legwork to get those orders to the point where they're ready to be placed. But on the other hand, they that just as far as I'm concerned as a seller, I would have liked to have a little bit of the share of that, but it's not the way we cut the deal.
So one of the other little topic, which is an important one, inventory.
It's a dirty word.
So, of course, where does the inventory show up? It shows up on the balance sheet. So on the balance sheet, I looked at the balance sheet. I said, John, there's a lot of inventory here. I won't bore you with the actual number, but it was a pretty hefty number. So I said, you know, Is this real? Yep, absolutely. So I said, well, okay. Do you think you could take a little look at that? And so there were several factors, but I walked in one day and there in the we'll call it in the warehouse there was a there was a pile of boxes started to appear. And one of John's guys was bundling up stuff and putting these in boxes. So 42 years is a long time in business, and things accumulate. And my thing is, if there's dust on the box, is that really necessary inventory? And John really tidied that up. You and your guys really, really did a great job of tidying that up.
Well, you're right. Stale inventory is stale inventory, and the value is something maybe, but maybe not worth what it takes to sell it. Although we have occasionally we still sell some of that dusty stuff.
Yeah, but
That's not.
if you got a business such as John's, look at inventory. You know what it is, and it's really really important. I suppose like it doesn't have to be a business like John's. There are many businesses that obviously there's a lot of inventory around. What's those? I walk into what's those stores. I go in with my wife from time. I tried not to actually, but where they have, well, what are those self-help, not self-help, but the those craft stores. And those craft stores, I go in, I say, how on earth can anybody keep track of this? I can't remember the name of them now. They're well-known.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I just think, how on earth can anybody keep track of this? Because and so much, and you're not getting paid for it. Oh my goodness, it must be a nightmare.
Well, yeah, I agree. And industrial products are just as difficult. They're just
Indeed.
not as many of them, I guess. As many SKUs. Is that the right word?
It is indeed SKUs. That's right. Yeah. So, I guess as a last question, advice to sellers, but also advice to buyers. What would you say?
Well, I think first of all, as I mentioned, I started this business, uh, working with my tools and out of a truck and doing repairs. So from the ground up, that's the hard way to do it. I think now looking back, I would have been a lot better off to find a business and buy it and use some of the financing tools. But on the other hand, that's a big step for somebody to take when you don't have any business experience in any, and you're wondering about the capital and the debt. But I think that's really, it makes sense at this point. I would be looking to buy a business, not start one. As far as the sellers, I think that's as individual as the owners. What do you want out of it in terms of not just financially, but the success of the business, or what do you want to see happen after you leave? Maybe it doesn't matter, maybe it does, but that's something you have to decide yourself. I was lucky. I had a clear idea of what I wanted to do, and we did it. We accomplished it. It took some time, but it got done.
So, really appreciate it. One thing we haven't said the name of the on your shirt there, John.
J. Herbert Corporation, and so we're in Florida, Kissimmee, and we're always looking for contacts, good friends, new friends, new customers, new vendors, everything.
Yep, absolutely. Well, John, I really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk about what was I have to say, it was a wonderful experience for me.
It was a lot of work, but we had a lot of fun too. Absolutely. And yeah, it was a good time.
We still have our breakfasts together.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, I'm still friendly with the buyers, but also friendly with the broker. And, that's a testimonial to, I don't know what that is, but
John, thank you very much. I really appreciate you spending your time. Thank you. Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening to Happy Buyer, Happy Seller. The sad truth is only 15% of businesses listed for sale actually sell. Hopefully this episode removed some of the stumbling blocks to sale and highlighted the ways in which barriers can be overcome. If you're a business owner thinking about selling or a buyer considering your next step, I'm always here to chat and help you think through your options. So, to learn more or access additional resources, then reach out to me directly at www.happybuyerhappyseller.com. Don't worry if you're not ready to make a move yet. An early conversation can make a real difference down the road. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with someone who may be considering selling or buying a business. Until next time, I'm Shaun Thornton, helping create happy buyers and happy sellers. Cheerio.